If you have an idea for the name of your business, if you have a logo, go to the uspto.gov site. We'll say it again, uspto.gov. There are tons of categories that you can search for all of those names and logos and marks in. For an example, there's one for education, there's one for consulting, there's one for entertainment. So right now your idea is just in one space, but you think it may branch out into another. It would be wise for you to look and see that your name or logo and mark are already being used in those categories. If they are, you can't use it. However, if it's not, it's yours. So, second step, once you've done that, you've figured out that you can use this name and these logos and these marks, so what are you gonna do now? You have to think about protecting your IP that you're going to attach to those names and logos and marks. Now, the first thing I would say is you have to think of what is it that you're creating, because IP falls in 3 buckets. So you have patents, you have copyrights, and you have trademarks. So patents are typically tangible goods, they're inventions, so they're things that are in first use. They also could be methodologies. So let's say you created a new way of doing something. That could be patentable. Now you could also write down the methodology, and that's copyrighted. So they work together. If you have something and it's your logo, your mark, your brand, that's a trademark. So that's the second bucket. And the third bucket would be copyright. Copyright is, think of artistic creations or things that are written. So it could be articles, poetry, code. All of that is subject to copyright law. So once you figure out what you're selling, if you can sell it under the name that you would like to, or you can attach it to a brand or a logo or a mark you would like to use it for, then you think about, okay, well now I understand the type of IP that I have, great. Now that you've got that bucketed, you need to make sure that you have an entity formed. That could be an LLC, that could be a C corporation. Key thing is, what is the right entity for you? So there are typically 2 types that people use. It's an LLC, which is, think of it if you and I are business partners and we're gonna do something together, it's just the 2 of us, maybe we're never gonna take investor funds, cool, we'll just get an LLC because it's just you and I. When you do that, if you have a partner, or if you have 2 partners, 3 partners, however many, I would suggest if you're gonna do an LLC, you probably don't want more than 4. Make sure you get an operating agreement. And I say this, I'm gonna tell a short story. So I know of a founder who had 2 partners, and they just decided that they were going to form this entity. They actually had a service, so it wasn't a good. And they did business fully on a handshake, right? Like just trust, because this is your friend. You think, okay, it's cool, my friend wouldn't cheat me. Well, if you don't have it in writing, your friend can cheat you, and in this case, the friend did cheat them. So the problem is they didn't have anything in writing, no operating agreement in terms of how do you split the funds. And it turned out one person was, I don't want to say embezzling, that's a strong word, but one person was depleting the funds of the entity to do things that they shouldn't do, such as pay rent, pay light bills, pay student loans. And when the business dissolved, this person was also left holding the bag. So, and they had done nothing wrong. So you always want to make sure when you have a partner, you want an operating agreement, full stop. That should detail
that's written out to your business and just hand them over to your landlords. Don't hand them out to people that's commingling funds. That's the one. So, first things first. When you have a really great idea, what does somebody think is the first thing you do when you have a good business idea?
So, second piece to that, if you have a large business, like let's say you have an app. How many people actually have an app or some type of tech? Okay, a good number of you. How many are you going to take investors? Okay, so you guys, I'm sure already know you need a C Corp. If you're going to take investors, you're going to take money, you're going to trade equity for that, you definitely need a C Corp. So those are your 2 flavors. I would say once you've done those 2 things, you've kind of figured out, what am I selling? What's the IP? Is it which bucket does my IP fall in? Is it a patent, a trademark, or a copyright? Maybe a mix of all 3, depending on what it is that you have. Then you've thought about the entity that you need. This is the piece where you talk about, now I need IP protection. So I'm gonna give you a key tip that, this is another thing that I've also seen with founders. is entities should file for IP protection, not individuals. I'm gonna say that one more time. You want your entity to file for IP protection, not an individual. 2 reasons. 1, if you are an individual filing for IP protection, USPTO is more than likely to just reject it. They like to give it to companies that could potentially live into perpetuity versus you, and you're gonna die one day. Sorry. Well, somebody in here might make some type of machine to make us last forever, and that's why you're sitting here. So second piece, let's say that you've already got that worked out. You also want to ensure that the individual is not applying for the protection, because let's say your business partner in the same scenario I gave you, you don't have an operating agreement, you don't have the entity form, you're just going based on pure trust. And let's say that person goes behind your back and files for protection. What happens in case your business dissolves? You don't have any access to those marks, to those brands, to anything that you built with that person if they have incorporated the company and filed for these protections before you. So this also is just good business to make sure that you're protected from ensuring that you don't have any of that messiness if and when you decide to launch, or if and when you decide to part ways. Now the last piece, which is the big piece, once you have your entity formation, once you have your IP protections filed, you also want to make sure that now you're protecting the entity coins, right? So I've seen this a lot. This came up a good deal in Empower Her, and also I got emails about it after people watched the course. You want to ensure that you are not commingling funds. Commingling funds is going to do away with the protections that you have when you file for an entity. So what that means, you and your partner, you have an LLC. That's a limited liability company. Essentially what that means is, let's say you do a bad business deal, or the product that you did was faulty, and somebody wants to sue. They're gonna sue your company. Now, if you've been commingling funds, and you've been putting the company money in your personal bank account, and your partner's doing the same, or you guys are using personal credit cards to fund business expenses as opposed to an entity, you're essentially showing that you use the company's money as your own and vice versa, which can be a factor into negating the protections that having a company is supposed to afford you. And I have seen courts do away with that protection. And that means, so any money that you have personally that you owe on a debt, or that happens to be, you get sued and you have to pay this money, it's gonna come out of your 401k, your savings account, put it on your credit card, or however you have to pay for it. It will have to come out of your pocket as opposed to whatever assets that your company has. So once you got all that stuff done, you want to make sure that you have credit cards, bank accounts. All of that stuff should be set up in your entity's name. And that also makes it a ton easier for you when you need to do business, and you also need to file taxes at the end of the year. You have a very clean ability to just hand it over to your accountant and say, here are all of the things that we did this year. These are all the things we need to write off. Are we good? Of course, sometimes you have an occasional personal expense that maybe you didn't expect to incur. That can be okay. But if you're doing that on a continuous basis, it's a no-no. So I want to make sure I kind of got those big high-level buckets for you. Now, the first thing you want to think about, again, before you ship product, before you start offering a service under a branded name, you want to check uspto.gov. Second piece, figure out what kind of IP does your product or service fall within. If it's a tangible good, if it's a new way of doing business or a new methodology, that is patentable. Is it a song? Is it code? Is it an article? Is it a book? Copyright. Is it a logo? Is it something that's going to help you brand your business? That's subject to trademark. Once you have that, make sure you have your entity, whether that's an LLC or a C Corp. Fourth piece to that, your entity is going to file for those IP protections that we talked about in one of those 3 buckets, or all of them if they apply. Last piece, use your entity to go open bank accounts, open your credit cards, open whatever lines of credit that it is that you may need to function. And those are kind of the step-by-step basics. And I wanted to make sure that I could get as many questions as possible, because last time I ran out of time with questions, and I want to make sure that I can cover as much as possible. So, oh, okay. Definitely not you in the back. I see you, Angela. Okay, you have a question?
So I have an innovation booklet that I've been working on that has 66 inventions. 32 of them have to do with sustainable energy production using quantum technology. I don't want to apply to the